Have you ever felt haunted by a memory that simply won't let you go? A moment that seemed completely trivial on the outside, but inside it felt like a small catastrophe. Maybe it was an unguarded word in a meeting, the instant you stumbled in a crowded room, or that embarrassing silence when suddenly the words failed you. Hours, sometimes even years later, it resurfaces again, razor sharp, like a film you keep rewinding, pausing, and dissecting scene by scene. You imagine how others must have looked at you then, how they judged you or secretly smirked. And yet, if you were to ask them today, they most likely wouldn't even remember what you're talking about. For them, it was just a fleeting moment, instantly drowned in the stream of their own thoughts. It is exactly in this difference that a deep truth about human consciousness lies. We move through life convinced that others are constantly watching us, judging us, and storing every one of our actions. This is called the spotlight illusion, a feeling as if an invisible light were exposing each of our flaws for an audience that misses nothing. But the truth is this: the spotlight doesn't exist. The audience is only an imagination. For generations, people have lived as if they stood at the center of other people's stories, as if they were the main character in someone else's life. This belief runs so deep that it is rarely questioned. Even when we wake up, we unconsciously prepare for a kind of performance. The clothes we choose are not only comfortable, but also meant to shape the impression we leave. Our voice, the angle of a photo, the words we dare or don't dare to say, all of it is measured against an imaginary observer. Without realizing it, we spend much of our lives rehearsing for an audience that is in truth too busy with its own play. One could call this phenomenon a subtle form of relational egoism, not in the sense of I am more important than others, but in the belief of being constantly present in the minds of others. It is like a silent prison. Watch yourself closely for just a week, and you'll see how many of your actions are guided by the unspoken question, what will others think of me? You notice it when you hesitate before posting a comment, when you don't send a message right away, or when you later wonder whether your smile came at the right moment. This constant spinning in the mind becomes the background music of our lives. Music no one else can hear. The mask we wear for others, the socially accepted role shaped by expectations, slowly becomes confused with our true self. We invest energy to polish and defend this mask and fear it might crack. Meanwhile, our authentic self, which seeks wholeness rather than performance, remains hidden in the shadows, and the irony is obvious. While we endlessly worry about how we appear to others, they are doing exactly the same. Everyone is trapped in their own self-observation, rehearsing for an audience that is itself only rehearsing. What looks like genuine social connection is often just a chorus of lonely individual voices. Think of the nights you lay awake replaying a conversation word for word, as if your worth hinged on each sentence. You probably analyze gestures, pauses, and possible meanings. And yet, if you could look into the other person's mind, you'd find that they had long forgotten the whole thing, lost in their own doubts, fears, and spirals of thought. This awareness leads us to a deeper understanding of human anxiety. Most people live with a constant underlying social tension, not because they are inherently fragile or neurotic, but because they act according to a false model of social reality. They believe they are constantly judged, observed, and put under a microscope. But this microscope does not exist. The gaze of others is fleeting, distracted, entangled in their own concerns. Look closely at everyday life. Someone comes late to work and is convinced that everyone condemns him for it. In reality, hardly anyone notices, and if they do, it is forgotten within minutes. Another person gives a presentation and torments herself afterward with the thought that every pause and every slip was noticed and laughed at. Meanwhile, colleagues are usually far too preoccupied with their own insecurities. Someone else avoids parties because he is sure that his reserve makes him seem boring. Another spends hours polishing every sentence in an email, afraid a wrong word could ruin his reputation. What all these experiences have in common is not reality, but illusion. The one who thinks he was late overlooks that someone else arrived even later. The one who believes his presentation was a disaster forgets that he can barely recall the content of others' talks himself. The one who avoids social contact is not labeled boring, but simply goes unnoticed because others are too occupied with themselves. And the one who endlessly edits emails does not realize that no one has the time or focus to read them so critically. Everyone is too trapped in the mirror of their own fears to truly notice the mistakes of others. If the audience isn't really watching, if the spotlight is only an illusion, then the possibility of being authentic remains. Realizing that no one pays us as much attention as we believe opens a door to freedom. It means we can be ourselves without the burden of constant self-staging. It means that the chains of imagined judgments can loosen, and that we no longer live for the reflection in other people's eyes, but for the truth that arises within ourselves. And this is where the paradoxical lesson emerges. The less we try to impress others, the more genuine our connections become. Life is a stage of quiet fears, a theater where every actor believes all eyes are on him. In reality, everyone is busy trying to remember their own lines, control their gestures, and keep their fragile balance. We think an audience observes us mercilessly, but in fact, this audience consists of equally nervous fellow actors drowning in their own insecurities. This illusion, already strong enough in everyday life, has grown immense in the age of social media. We have built platforms whose purpose is less about communication than about sustaining this deception, the illusion that our lives are spectacles others eagerly await. We post our breakfast as if it were a cultural event. We write down casual thoughts as if they were revelations. We present the smallest details of our day as if the world were watching intently. The more we stage these fragments, the more dependent we become on the fragile currency of validation. We edit photos, polish phrases, and select only the moments that show us in the best light. We invent stories that make our lives seem more harmonious, purposeful, and enviable than they actually are. But this shiny surface has its price. When the likes don't come or the recognition is less than hoped for, doubts and unrest grow, and we forget that others are at the same time frantically maintaining their own performance. Everyone is so busy nurturing their own illusion that they hardly notice anyone else's, and here is where the first crack in this theater of self-deception appears. Observe your own behavior. How do you really deal with the posts of others? You look at them for 1 or 2 seconds, maybe hit like automatically and scroll on. Rarely do you stop. Rarely do you think deeply about the other person's life. Your attention is fragmented, superficial, restless. If this is how you perceive others' worlds, why believe their view of you is fundamentally different? Think of all the times you felt shame or embarrassment about something you said or did, convinced others would never forget, and then weeks later you realize no one remembers. The source of this distortion lies in a fundamental asymmetry of inner experience. We ourselves have complete access to our inner life, to our thoughts, insecurities, hopes, and contradictions. We experience every small stir of our feelings and therefore see ourselves as uniquely complex beings. But when we look at others, we see only their outward actions, their gestures, their words, their outward reactions. You see all of that, but the inner struggles, the depth of their thoughts, remain invisible. This creates a strong distortion. In your eyes, others seem simpler, more predictable, less complex than yourself. You see yourself as the main character in a great complicated drama, and the others only as supporting roles. It is precisely from this imbalance that one of the greatest illusions of social life arises. The belief that others perceive us with the same intensity with which we perceive ourselves. In reality, we massively overestimate how much space we occupy in the thoughts of others. The truth seems sobering at first. For most people, even for those who are close to us, we are not the center of their inner world. We appear on the edge of their consciousness and disappear again, like a brief flash of light that lingers longer or shorter depending on the moment. This realization can feel like a wound. After all, a large part of our self-worth is based on the belief that we are of deep significance to others. To grasp that in the inner universes of others we often play no central role can feel like a devaluation, yet irrelevance is not a judgment about our worth. It rather describes the nature of consciousness. Every person is inevitably immersed in their own reality, not out of selfishness, but because perception works that way. Consciousness can only ever flow through one perspective, and it is precisely in this that there is no condemnation but liberation. When you truly internalize that others are not observing you as you thought, a new space opens up. You no longer have to revolve around the imagined judgments of others. You can return to your own center. Imagine what this could change in your life. What dreams would you pursue if the fear of judgment no longer paralyzed you? What truths would you speak if you were not constantly clinging to your social mask? This change does not mean withdrawing from people or becoming indifferent to relationships. It means redirecting the energy you have previously invested in your outer image towards something genuine. Instead of polishing masks for the applause of others, you begin to discover your inner source of meaning and strength. Living from your authentic self means living courageously. It means recognizing that your worth does not depend on the fragile applause of a distracted audience. It means knowing that even if others forget your words or actions, your own inner self never forgets whether you were true or just playing a role. True freedom lies not in being seen, but in seeing yourself clearly. And it is precisely in this clarity that the paradox lies. The less you try to impress others, the more alive you become. When you realize that most of the roles you play are unnecessary performances for an inattentive audience, you can lay them aside. And the surprising thing, as soon as you stop pretending for others and begin to act genuinely, you automatically become more attractive. Authenticity has a magnetic force that no amount of perfect staging can replace. Ask yourself, how much energy have you already spent maintaining an image that perhaps no one is really looking at? The shift from external validation to true inner autonomy does not require indifference toward others, but a rebalancing. The opinions of others lose their excessive power over your decisions. The first step is something like a motivation check for a week before you make an important decision. Ask yourself, am I really choosing this because I want it, or because I hope others will approve? After only a short time, you will notice how often your decisions are actually influenced by an imagined audience. The second step is to reconsider your social fears. If you feel tension in a situation, ask yourself precisely, am I really afraid of the concrete consequences of rejection or only of the feeling of being judged? Most of the time you will notice that the fear is out of proportion to the actual consequences. The third element is applying to relationships what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control. You can control your behavior, your words, and your decisions, but not the reactions or judgments of others. And the crucial point, you do not even have to. An enlightening experiment is to observe your own attention toward others for a week. See how superficially you process most encounters, how quickly your thoughts return to your own worries. When someone tells you a personal story, do you really listen with full concentration, or are you already thinking about what you will say next? When you see a couple arguing in a restaurant, do you really analyze their relationship, or do you briefly notice the scene and then return to your own conversation? This observation shows you realistically how much genuine attention you yourself give and how much you can expect in return. If even your own attention is limited and distractible, why believe that others could give you more undivided concentration? The mathematics of human attention is relentless. Our mental budget is limited and directed mostly inward toward worries, plans, memories, expectations. The most profound exercise, however, is to find an inner source of recognition within yourself. When this insight truly sinks in, you experience something like an existential reordering. Your inner focus shifts from external approval to inner clarity. This does not happen overnight, but step by step as a fundamental change in your attitude toward life. Before this realization, you live in constant vigilance. Every conversation feels like an exam, every pause like a sign of rejection, every criticism like a threat to your worth. Your self-esteem wavers like a ship on the open sea, dependent on the waves of external recognition. But when you internalize this wisdom, a kind of existential stability grows within you. Your worth no longer depends on a permanent self-presentation. You allow yourself to be publicly imperfect because you know that your mistakes are not scrutinized nearly as much as you once thought. This also becomes evident in practice. You begin to have conversations with genuine curiosity instead of with the desire to impress. You make professional decisions according to your true values and goals, not according to what you think others consider respectable. Your relationships become deeper because you no longer pour energy into a facade. And the beautiful irony is this: precisely when you stop trying to please everyone, you attract the people who truly fit you. When you stop following a predetermined script, you find your own voice. There is also compassion in this change. As soon as you recognize that others are just as trapped in their own dramas as you are in yours, you develop a deeper understanding of human nature. Criticism hurts you less because you understand it often reflects the insecurity of the other person and is rarely an objective judgment about you. Imagine waking up tomorrow completely free from the need to impress anyone. Which areas of your life would immediately change? It is precisely this journey that leads to a clear conclusion. True freedom does not arise from dependence, but from the recognition of our fundamental solitude. When you accept that no one loves or validates you in the way you once imagined, you do not become less human. You become more deeply human. This realization does not diminish the value of relationships, but places them in a more realistic, paradoxically even more loving light. As soon as you stop constantly expecting validation from others, something decisive changes within you. You no longer enter relationships out of a sense of lack, no longer with a silent hunger for recognition, but from a feeling of inner wholeness. This is not just a psychological but an existential shift. Because when you realize that others, just like you, are trapped in their own labyrinth of fears, doubts, and hidden struggles, you stop demanding that they carry your self-esteem. Instead, you meet them with genuine understanding and compassion. Suddenly you notice how much unnecessary energy you have invested for years in wearing masks, in adapting, in bending your truth for various expectations. This tiresome performance becomes unnecessary. The fear of judgment loses its power, and in its place arises a new way of being, one that is at the same time lonelier and yet more deeply connected. Lonelier because you realize that each of us lives in our own inner world into which no one can fully enter. More connected because precisely this realization of loneliness forms the basis of true empathy. We are islands but united in the ocean of a shared solitude. Living with this understanding requires courage. It takes strength to let go of the security of external validation, to fully take responsibility for your own life. But the reward is freedom, the rarest and most precious form of freedom, the freedom to be yourself without apologizing in a world that constantly wants to turn you into something adapted or profitable. This path is the process of truly becoming who you are, but for that you must be ready to let go of the crutches of external recognition, because freedom means full responsibility to be the author of your own life without excuses, without hiding behind the judgments of others. Many fear this freedom because it seems uncomfortable, but it is the only one that truly belongs to you. When you look at your life through this lens, you will see something remarkable. The decisive moments of your growth were not those in which you pleased everyone. They were the moments when you acted without permission, when you had the courage to be different, to accept misunderstandings or rejection, just to stay true to yourself. These moments were not comfortable, but they were transformative. And here lies a deep truth. When you free yourself from the prison of others' expectations, you also free them. You no longer unconsciously demand their constant approval. You allow them to truly meet you not as an audience but as fellow human beings. This kind of freedom radiates outward. It becomes a silent invitation for others to live their own truth as well. This is the silent revolution of the human spirit. Not a revolution of systems, but an inner one in the way we see ourselves, others, and life. It begins with a simple but radical realization. People think about us far less than we believe, and precisely in this lies the doorway to liberation. Because when the gaze of others is not constantly fixed on us, we are finally free to live as we truly are. Hence the question for you: how much of your life has so far been determined by the invisible chase for recognition, and how much greater could your life become if you freed yourself from it? This wisdom urges us to see this not as theory, but as daily practice. Every time you put authenticity above approval, every time you listen to your inner voice instead of the noise of external expectations, the foundation of your freedom grows. If these thoughts have touched you, feel free to share your insights. Maybe there is a point that has particularly struck you, that you recognize in your own life. And if you know someone who suffers under the burden of external expectations, share this with them. Perhaps it will give them the same relief as it gave you. And if you want to continue discovering such ideas from psychology and philosophy applied to everyday life, then subscribe to this channel and activate the bell, because right here we are creating a space where these insights can be lived. And never forget, in the moment you stop living for the approval of others, your true life begins.